Hi. The next question is basically, what advice do you have for a conflicted Catholic? But I'm going to read you the whole question. It says, love your work. Thank you. Just listened to a video and it was great. I have an issue. I am Catholic converted and over the years enjoyed it, but I found I became judgmental over the dogma, so I pulled away. Because I believe in God's love and that no religion is the correct one, and I believe in things like Reiki, I feel like I am doing wrong by the church. I seem to be black and white if I cannot follow what the church says I should not be doing. Yes, I know it's guilt. I am not sure how I come to terms with not following dogma and yet be a follower. And of course, the crisis in the church is hard to deal with, even though I know humans are flawed and that can happen. I know I sound confused. I guess what I am saying is I love your attitude of God and that it is love, and therefore that goes above the dogma that can separate us, but have not yet been able to bring those things together. I seem to feel it is either one or the other, and I cannot have both. Any suggestions? Well, and this is going to be me speaking, not me speaking for the Catholic Church. So I want to make that very clear. But, I'm a convert too. And so I also struggle with the identical issues. And so I completely understand that problem. And I've heard this from a lot of people who are in the church, even, not just converts. So I think there are other Catholics who struggle with it. We don't have to understand or define everything to love God with all of our hearts, souls, and minds. I think that we forget that God is mystery, and it's okay that He created us in the manner wherein God remains mystery, and that it's okay for us to love Him with all our hearts and souls and minds without understanding all things. So do that and let the rest follow. I find many seeming contradictions as well, but I allow the Spirit to lead me. And I also listen to what the church has to say. I respect both. And what I want to say about that is, in years past, I have found, that there are many issues where I didn't understand the church's teaching on one thing or another. And I would just accept what the church taught about a matter, and allow it to take its course within me. And I would find later that it made sense to me later. So like I started developing um, this attitude of, well, the church is probably right, but at the moment I don't understand that teaching. Now, obviously, there are other issues to which this person is referring, and many of these other questioners are referring. And these are not things that have to do with the doctrines, and some of them are doctrines, but a lot of this has to do with the behavior of the church in regards to certain horrendous behaviors that have occurred in the past. That's a little different issue, but it's also the different issue of excluding people for being honest about their their doctrinal disputes in their own heads, their own process, their own spiritual path, which is not leading them to believe or to know or to uh, accept everything on faith. And I think one of the biggest things that is difficult for some of us is that when you start having if you have a near-death experience, or if you have a lot of out-of-body experiences like I have, and I've had the near-death too, there are certain things that you have seen, and so you have experiences of. So is it possible that you have misinterpreted what those things mean? Certainly. That certainly is possible. Do I know quantum physics? No. Do I understand how God created all things and how life came into being and how cellular memory is carried throughout, history in the different constructs of mankind? No, I just have these varying, you know, echoes of knowing that these things are and that they exist, but I can't define it. I'm not a scientist. So some of what people struggle with is, and the gay and lesbian issue, because we want to love one another. And so these things become very difficult and controversial for those who love the church, but they also love their fellow man, they love their children, they love their families, and I think you get what I'm saying, that there will be contraries. There's going to be people who don't just accept blanketly everything that the church says, and I think that a lot of Catholics don't know how they are to correctly respond to that. And I think that we get mixed messages on that because different priests will obviously have different opinions from their own experience and from their training. But we can respect both the experience. We respect our own desire that we wish to love. We wish to understand that God is love. We want to, even Catholic teaching that Saint Faustina, Jesus said to her that mercy is God's greatest attribute. And how do we reconcile that with some of the dogmas then that we are then taught that sometimes make us feel like we are being asked to choose between mercy being God's greatest attribute and no, you cannot accept this. So that's a legitimate issue that I think a lot of Catholics probably, and people in other faiths probably struggle with in their own way too. So we respect both. We let the Spirit guide us, and we let the rest follow. There is some balance in that, but there is only peace in loving God for his own sake, knowing his mystery is greater than us or what we believe we can understand. So it's okay that we don't know. Our God is bigger than us, and he's even bigger than the church. Even though as Catholics we believe God founded that church, he's still bigger than it. He lives and moves and breathes within all of creation. And thus we can't really parcel him out in such ways. We must find him in all of his hiding places. So hopefully those words are helpful a little bit on that question. And I sympathize with that dilemma. And, but I think that we must always choose and understand and know that God is love and mercy is his greatest attribute. But God does also need to reveal to us his requirements for us. And there is a continuing, ongoing, revelatory experience in our faith journeys that we also have to recognize as part of our path. And so, when we have these contradictory places in our faith and things like that, we have to be willing to do the study and the work, and even be willing to take the stance that when it's a doctrinal issue or something, it's possible the church is right because we don't know that much about it yet, and we need to do the work. And we need to pray on it more as we do the work. It's also possible when we're talking about things like, even popes, and although I do agree that only God corrects the pope, but even popes and cardinals and bishops can have errors in judgment in how some things are handled. And we've seen that. We've seen that in how some things have been very, very badly handled in the church. And as lay people, we sometimes are put in a position of having the responsibility to stand up and say, you can't do that. We won't accept that. We will not stand for it. So, this is a fine line, especially in the Catholic Church, because of the teaching on obedience, which is so strong. But we have that issue because we know that there is such a thing as holy obedience, and that it is very important to be willing to submit to proper obedience. But we also know that that very concept gets used and misused to make women stay in abusive marriages, to tell people to be quiet about things that they should not be quiet about in the priesthood, to have people obey for not holy reasons. So Catholics get confused by where is the proper line. That's where we go to prayer, and we do ask, is this a question of a real judgment made by the Holy Church on doctrine? And is it something where maybe they're right and I just don't know enough yet? Or is this an issue, like a moral issue, where there is just bad judgment taking place and I just have to step up? And we're going to be dealing with both. And so, as the church faithful, this is where we all have to learn more about what holy obedience means. And we have to study it and pray on it so that we know when we're being asked to be obedient to the church for the right reasons, and when we're being asked to be obedient to cover evil. It's a tough question. It's a tough place to sit.